Finance on the Utilities Commission. I just want to wait a couple of minutes because Vice Chairman Ramon for our Finance Commission has just walked in so that we can begin proceedings. I'd like Chef to come up and provide what the latest information is, and then a review of where we stand. I know that we do have some input from materials that we have been handed out that some of us we haven't seen before. So, what we are going to do on public comment, rather than restrict it to any point in time, is that throughout the entire proceedings, if public wants to make comments, they are welcome to do so. Chef, if you could give us an update then.
I just need a few seconds, Peter. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners, citizens. As always, I'm glad to be back. I think the most significant thing to talk about, you all should have two things. You should have a one-pager that looks like this, and you should have a one-page table that looks like this, that are new. Do you have those things?
No, I don't.
Is that, Chef?
I do.
Mr. Wright, is that Article 12?
Sorry?
Is it Article 12?
You have another one of these? Yes.
I have extras.
No, yeah, I need them. I need one.
Thanks, Chef.
Give you guys half of these and I'll start the other half up there.
You have one?
There's these.
Thanks. Got one of those? If you do have a...
That one.
No, that's not, that's different. Okay, let's put them on.
Actually, you should only have the one-pager already. The table I got from Ted. I'm not sure if you got that or not, but we can talk about that in a minute.
I believe we have both the table. It's stapled together. So,
Oh, good. Okay, great.
so we have an entire
Good.
package.
Okay, good. Okay, I think the most significant thing to talk about is that pursuant to the Utilities Commission's motion last week, I communicated with OUC and got the results indicated on the one-page text. They've agreed to delete the site option provision from the PPA. They've agreed to language that clarifies the energy pricing during capacity deficiency conditions to clarify that it's limited to actual costs. And we've agreed on language addressing the pro rata allocation of any stranded cost recovery in the event that we wind up on the wrong end of a judicial or legislative decision, suing successfully and get recovery. We talked about alternatives that might try to specify recovery based on the component or components of the claim and any recovery that might be awarded by the court. But in terms of to allocate risk in what Mr. Browder and I thought was fair, and to recognize the possibility the court might not say exactly what was what, we agreed on this language that I would recommend to you, and it says, whatever percentage the OUC PPA-related stranded cost claim represents of the total stranded cost claim would define the percentage that they would get of recovery. If we asked, let's just say, we asked for $200 million in stranded cost recovery, 80 million of that, it's probably high, whatever, 80 million of that is OUC PPA-related costs. Let's say 60 million, that's probably closer. 60 million of that is OUC PPA-related stranded costs. That would be 30% of the total. Whatever award we got, OUC would get 30%. Now, it's possible the court might say, well, you get the OUC PPA-related cost of $60 million, and that's it. They get 30% of that. We get 70. On the other hand, they might say you don't get anything for OUC. They'd still get 30% of what we got. It seems to be a fair allocation of the risk either way, and it also addresses the scenario where the court doesn't say what you're getting. So I would recommend that, too. I think it's fair.
Does it address the costs of collecting this? The fees, the legal fees involved in collecting the settlement? What happens to those? The net, they get is it the net amount they get a pro rata amount of, or the gross?
It does not address the cost of achieving the result. They get the award. If it costs us $2 million to pursue the claim and we get $80 million, in the example I was using, they get 30% of $80 million. We'd pay our own legal fees.
Attorney Wright, returning to Section 12 that was deleted,
Yes.
How does that affect Article 5.2 then? That's the term termination. Because that, I think, based OUC's termination was pursuant to subsection 12.2.
Sorry. Bear with me a second.
And I can read that for the record. It's under letter C.
Mm-hmm. 5.2C.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If this first amended agreement is terminated by OUC pursuant to subsection 12.2, or by Vero Beach pursuant to Exhibit C, Appendix B, Section 1A, then the following shall apply.
I would say that the reference to OUC's possible termination that is contained in 5.2C really just becomes extraneous, because when the entirety of Section 12 goes away, there is no 12.2 pursuant to which OUC could terminate.
So then they can't terminate the contract?
Not for that reason.
Well, for what reason then? I mean, that's the stated reason here in the contract. 12.2. And if 12 has been deleted, it certainly would affect that.
Bear with me a second.
Certainly.
Sorry.
Okay. OUC has other rights, as do we, to terminate the agreement pursuant to defaults. They also have a right to terminate pursuant to 15.11.2, which is the change in law provision in the hypothetical event that all the bad things happen and they wind up with a small enough base capacity sale. Under the new final arrangement, they do have the unilateral right to terminate. But if you look in 8.
But this particular item would be deleted then, since it refers to something that would no longer be part of the contract?
It wouldn't matter. We can delete it.
Well, I think you would need to delete it since it refers to something that no longer exists, right? Well, I'm wondering if it would be replaced with something else.
No, it's not going to be replaced with anything else. The specific right to terminate that would that presently vests in OUC pursuant to 12.2 would completely go away. Since it can't occur, the right to terminate could never be exercised. I'll agree with you that cleaning it up is good practice, and we'll work in that direction. As I've said before, we had to kind of walk a line here in trying to make fewer changes rather than more changes. We did clean up a fair amount of stuff, but we had to kind of put a materiality threshold on what we decided to clean up and not clean up. But they do have other rights to terminate. You did ask the question, for what reason. They do have other rights to terminate for default.
Would you point those out for the record, please?
Sure. 8.3, in Section 8.3A, upon the occurrence of an event of default by either party hereunder, the non-defaulting party shall have the right to collect all amounts, et cetera, and to terminate this agreement during the continuation of such event of default. And the very last sentence of 15.11.2 says, if such reduced level is unacceptable to OUC, then OUC may terminate this first amended agreement.
With Section 8.3, the $50 million and the $20 million, I don't know if we should call them penalties or fees or whatever you would care to call them, that $50 million number, what does that represent? Do you know the origin of that number and exactly what it represents? I know that it was in the old contract, but there's been a lot of discussion about it, and I think perhaps it was not clear in the original contract exactly what it represented.
Other than it being a negotiated term of the 2008 agreement, I don't know its origin. I can tell you what I strongly believe it means. Mm-hmm. It means that in the event that either side, we or OUC, were to default and the non-defaulting party were to sue for damages, our respective damages would be free. Two things. If they were to default for the purpose of getting a better deal elsewhere. If we default for stop buying power from them for the purpose of buying power from somebody else, or they default for the purpose of selling the power for more to somebody else, if either party sues, they're entitled to. They may be entitled to actual damages up to the maximum of $50 million. Well, that's what it means.
Well, as you know, many of the numbers have changed. So, of course, the question remains: should those numbers be changed? Why 50 million? Why 20? And what is the relationship between the two, the 20 and the 50? I think that was not clear.
Other than the fact that they were negotiated numbers in the PPA that was negotiated by other people 7 years ago, I don't know what the difference is. The $20 million is the cap on damages that a non-defaulting party may possibly get if the default is for reasons other than the defaulting party seeking a better deal. We trying to get a lower price, they trying to get a higher price. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't know that there was any relationship between the $20 million and the $50 million.
Mm-hmm. Well, and with attorney's fees, too, the assignment of attorney's fees, we, of course, are a much smaller entity, legal entity than OUC. Okay. But it seems that with regard to the existing contract and, of course, the previous one, that the attorney's fees could be, either party would pay for attorney's fees. We are certainly outgunned by them. I think perhaps it should be something that along the line of the loser, the winner rather, would pay the person who loses should pay the fees. Otherwise, I think you encourage lawsuits, which is one thing we want to avoid in the future.
I think this addresses your question, Commissioner Moss. Section 15.18 says that each party is entitled to reimbursement of all reasonable costs incurred by it, including reasonable attorney's fees incurred in the enforcement or attempted enforcement hereof as a result of a breach of this first amended agreement by the other party. That says if one party sues the other and wins, then the losing party pays the attorney's fees and costs of the prevailing party.
Okay. What about the 50 million, though? Let's go back to that a minute. Is that a number that we should be looking at? Is that a correct number?
I wouldn't mess with it if I were you, and here's why. Is it a correct number or not? I don't know. But the possibility of OUC hitting $50 million under this new, shorter, lower-priced contract is not significant. Remember, it's a cap on actual damages. Give me a second.
Certainly.
I want to say, Harrington. Come on. Bill?
Yes, what do you need?
I think the net present value of all the capacity payments for the 8-year term to OUC is about $66 million using their discount rate. Is that true? Thank you. The point is, I don't think it's likely that OUC's damages will ever get close to $50 million. And we're about, when I get the answer to my fact question, I'm going to tell you why.
Well, I guess in the spreadsheets, the 50 million is always the number used. And I understand that it's a maximal number, but you start to think that that is the number automatically.
That is a mistaken impression.
Okay.
I think I've always said it's a cap on the actual damages.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you mind if I take my coat off? It's a little bit warm in here. Thank you.
Of course, if we go forward with the existing contract, it's a moot point because the existing contract, unamended, includes all of this language, correct?
Yes. And the capacity payments under the existing contract are a lot higher than the capacity payments under this contract. The reason that I'm asking Bill for the present value of the total capacity payments to OUC is this: the damages that OUC could reasonably claim if there were a default, we try to get a better deal, is the difference between the capacity payments to which they would otherwise have been entitled and the price at which they are able to resell the then freed up capacity. The lower the starting point, i.e. lower demand charges in the new PPA, the market price of capacity is going to be what it is. The lower the price, the less the damages. If I'm correct, that the total NPV of their total capacity payments is $60 million, it's highly likely that the net present value of what they could resell that capacity for or otherwise have value to them in terms of avoided capacity costs that they might not need to build something in 2022 or 2023. The probability of that value being greater than $16 million is really, really high, which means that the probability of them ever hitting $50 million is really, really low. Bill, you got my number? No.
And Attorney Wright, just to address it in broader terms, you would know as an attorney that one of the basic principles of English contract law is vitiation. And I'll define it for the rest of us who are not lawyers. There are situations where the parties have reached agreement, but the question arises whether the existence of some fact or occurrence of some event has destroyed the basis on which that agreement was reached, so that the agreement is discharged or in some other way vitiated. And as we all know, the history of this contract, 2008, when it was signed, that the general economic conditions changed shortly thereafter, as well as the conditions in the energy sector, shall we say. So there was a problem almost immediately.
It was for the whole world. I mean, I don't think an underlying change in economic circumstances.
Fortunately, the whole world didn't have this contract.
They had lots of other problems.
Mr. Wright, since we've segued to the penalty, or do you want to? Are you going? You're getting your answer.
I may be getting my answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay, just to get to the base product, net present value of capacity payments is $67 million. The net present value of the peaking capacity payments is $27 million. That's a total of $94 million. As we know, the prices are a lot less than under the existing contract. The market price is, as we projected, the market price is actually pretty close to the capacity payments, at least in the out years. It's probably not, and it varies because the capacity payments vary some years. It's probably fairly similar. I will say I think the probability of OUC being able to prove damages of $94 million is very low. So that such that I don't think the $50 million would bind.
Well, OUC doesn't think it's binding anyways as a cap.
They said that in a letter.
Yeah, and so since they're of that opinion, and we don't agree with that.
Correct.
Could you expound on that a little bit, or would you like me to read what they have in their letter to us on July the 1st, or would that? Because I'm kind of curious about this factor and about the attitude of OUC that they took to us when we towards us when we issued the RFP, started the RFP process, and was, heading in the direction of should we make it clear to them that this language means what it says by making the language even clearer. Because obviously they don't. And what they said to us on July the 1st in a letter to us is the energy supply contract does not restrict OUC's available legal remedies for an action for contract damage against the city. And go further on in the paragraph, accordingly, the city should not carelessly proceed forward with its RFP process based on the faulty assumption that the city's liability exposure to OUC is limited to the $50 million under Section 8.3 F3i. And OUC reserves the right to seek any and all alternative legal remedies against the city. Where are they coming from? And is that not something that, since they raised the issue and threatened us with it, we should not address as we amend this contract?
Well, I think where they were from them and where they're coming from today are different. I think their eyes, like mine, are on the prize of trying to bring this in for a landing and get us lower rates sooner. They didn't have to renegotiate this contract at all. They didn't have to give us any discounts at all. They didn't have to shorten the term at all.
I don't think we should rely on the mood that they're in, though.
We have a new contract that has lower prices and a 6-year shorter term on the table.
But I think there's incentive for them to do that. If you look at the packet that I distributed, and there's extra copies sitting on there, and I was going to go through this in a fair amount of detail about the 85 megawatt hour take or pay. But if you go into Exhibit 3.2. That's about the third page in, and it says manage reserve margins. And this is from Orlando Utilities Commission's credit rating agency presentation that is out on their website in April 2015. So they give this to Moody's, S&P, Fitch. It's also they do these to investors. I was in the bond business for 37 years. I literally looked at hundreds of these. And you'll notice there that the total reserve, well, actually, if you flip back one page, just as a starter. So this is the previous page. This is managing reserve margins, and it says actively pursue wholesale energy opportunities when we're right at the top of that list. So that is sort of as a segue. If you go to the next page in the managed reserve margins, you'll see the red line there, which is their total capacity. And if you look at 2016, the green line, which consists of not only their retail demand, but also their reserves. Typically in the utility industry, you look at a 15% reserve margin is pretty much standard. And then the demand from Vero, Bartow, LW, and WP, which I think is Winter Park. And you look at that line, and they're projecting, and this again is on their presentation to investors, so it gets vetted by everybody in their management. If I just eyeballed the numbers, so it may not be exact, but if you draw, that green line hit almost 1,800 megawatts. I don't know what the measure is. It probably has extra zeros in there. And you look at 2019, they're looking at an 11% drop. So, they're clearly concerned about demand declining, which is something that we talked about in the Utility Commission meeting last week. There's just so many things going on in the electric power industry business. I mean, realistically, it's at the biggest state of flux since the end of World War II. You have a U.S. and world economy, which is in a very slow grow mode. And there's really no indications it's going to change over time. So businesses really have little to no pricing power. So they're looking to cut cost with an absolute vengeance going on right now. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just last week about how the casinos are trying to bypass the Nevada Power Authority. So you got on-site and cogeneration technology continues to get more cost-effective. And there's also talk that consumers may get the right to buy, or rather to install solar panels on their roofs and generate electricity. You got battery storage technology improving. And this is what I really get worried about with this take or pay. And frankly, I think OUC is worried about it as well, because if you go back to this packet to my first exhibit, which is the graph that says Vero Beach electric power system consumption. These numbers are taken from our comprehensive annual financial report. And you look at that line on the top, which are the total numbers. We dropped from 2005. We had about 768,000 megawatt hours of demand. In 2014, the last numbers that I have available was 705,000. That's an 8.2% drop. Everybody's worried about the town of Indian River Shores leaving. We've had, effectively, the town of Indian River Shores has left because it's almost exactly the same amount. And frankly, what really worries me is if you go down to that line further down, that red line, which is commercial, there are the people that are potentially going to leave. And, if you flip to the next page to Exhibit 2, again, this is from our CAFR as well. You got the 10 largest electric users in our system. And, Piper, Walmart, Publix, St. John, John's Island Club, St. Edward's School. I mean, they're all, potential that we could lose all or part of that power demand. And, we have Florida Gas, Florida City Gas supposedly coming into the city. Restaurants are a big user of power. And, they might turn around and switch to gas. So, I was trying to figure out why. You always look at your adversary on a contract. Well, why do they want to renegotiate things? And, Mr. Wright, made that comment, and that was my initial reaction was, why are they doing this? They're being nice guys when they clearly haven't been. Well, I think they're worried about the same trends we are. So, I think we have maybe a little bit more power than what we think in terms of negotiating. So I think just as that as a backdrop, it's just something to think about as we go forward. So.
I'll make an observation that this is not the first time I've heard you say that they have a contract with us and this is a better deal. You said that in October of 2014 when you brought the first OUC proposal to us, and we had some issues with that. The city council asked you to go back, and you were a little reluctant to do that, and that's the context that you said that. Well, you know, they have a contract with us; they don't have to do this, but you said you'd do it, and you did, and you came back in November with a better deal. Then some time went by, and you and staff did the study. We had some consultants, and we decided that it was an even better deal for us to go to market. And so we made that recommendation to City Council. City Council accepted it. We issued the RFP. In that context, we get the rather nasty bullying letter from OUC that I just quoted from. But now they've come back with a better deal. So I think that there is, they have a reason to do this. They don't want to stop selling Vero Beach power, and they realize that they're at risk of losing this contract. And so therefore they threatened us with the damages that wouldn't be limited to what and in that statement that I skipped that mentions the black line Florida contract rules, is that a term of art that I don't understand, or do they mean what's printed on the page?
Did it say black letter?
Black letter? Yeah.
Black letter law is a term of art in law practice. It means completely well-settled law.
Okay.
Black line usually refers to a draft, although if they said black line, they probably
I think you were correct. They said black letter. Yeah. All right.
But parties can still have different views of exactly what the black letter law is.
Okay. Well, it seems interesting that this section F here on 8.3 of the remedies, it says, notwithstanding any other provision of this First Amendment agreement to the contrary, the total aggregate liability of OUC to Vero Beach and of Vero Beach to OUC under this First Amendment, whether based on claims arising under tort, contract, strict liability, or any other theory of recovery, shall not exceed the following. And then it goes into the $20 million, and it says for OUC where Vero Beach can demonstrate OUC has breached, $50 million, or for Vero Beach where OUC can demonstrate Vero Beach has breached, for purposes of pursuing more favorable market purchases, $50 million. But they don't think it means that. I guess we think it means what it says. They don't. Are we at risk of further litigation for things that we read in this contract that they don't think it means what it says? And particularly with this particular provision, should we strengthen the language and say perhaps I.V, it really means what it says? Add that to it? Would they be, I'm a little frustrated by the tone of their letter and by the threats that they made in it and how this goes, how this went forward. So I don't know. You say they don't feel that way now. They don't think that way now. I think that I'm not afraid to go back to them. I'm not afraid to. I think we have more strength in this than we believe. I think that my colleague down there just pointed out some of the reasoning. But I'm curious specifically to this. Should we strengthen this language because they don't believe it says what it says?
Well, I would say not. Further delay costs us money. We have not had any legal action with them at all. We did have the exchange of threats this year. We threatened them with our RFP. They perceived that as a threat. They threatened us back with a letter that I suspect was written by outside attorneys to do what it did. We went back to the table with them. They gave us extra concessions beyond what was on the table then. I would say not. We haven't had a single problem with them. To answer your earlier question, you're always at risk in any contract that somebody will change things. You can be toddling along, everything can be going fine, and somebody says, I think we can reinterpret this provision of this agreement to pay less. I've been on the receiving end of that on behalf of some of my independent power producers in the mid-'90s when Florida Power Corporation said, let's reinterpret the energy pricing provision of these power purchase agreements, and we're going to pay you guys less. And they brought the action. Most of the parties sued. Most of the parties settled. One of my clients took it all the way through a trial and an appeal, and we eventually won. But you're always at risk under any contract.
Let me ask you, I agree with Mr. Stradley, but did they view those letters, I think did view those letters as a breach of contract of sorts, and that's why they were threatening to sue. And it was really, it harmed us. We were not able to go out and get information that we needed. Meaning the language is not clear. I mean, if they can construe our attempting to gather additional information in order to make a well-informed decision as a breach of contract, to me that's a very serious matter. And I agree with the two gentlemen who just spoke.
Let me respond a little bit. Doesn't matter how you write the legal documents, any lawyer will find another way to pick it apart. I think Mr. Wright is exactly right. Doesn't matter how much we do in this document, another lawyer will interpret it differently, and we will be in a lawsuit. That's the nature of contracts. You can't write the contract strong enough not to totally eliminate the potential for misunderstanding on the words and picking at words. Any lawyer will do that. We've all been there. So I have a lot of faith in what is being told to us in legal documents. I'm not offended by the fact that they sued us or sent this nasty letter. I'm a little offended that our city council members didn't have the courage to stand up for their belief. That's their failure, not the lawyer's failure. He did his job. He sent them a letter, threatened them. They folded. That's the way you win wars. And they won a war, and there's no question about it. I have done an analysis on just the OUC contracts. That's all. Forget everything else because they don't change. And if you just look at the original OUC contract and think in terms of it, it's only an 8-year contract. One of the pluses from our point of view, and maybe what you're addressing, is the contract does run out in 8 years. That may be a plus from our point of view. Now, if you just analyze this 8 years, OUC's total contracts over that 8 years comes up to $285 million. If you take the same 8 years in the new contract, it comes up to $271 million. That's OUC for OUC, forgetting everything else, because that's really what's involved here. And if you present value those 8 years, the city is ahead, $60 million nominal is ahead, $51 million present value at the city's rate of $415. So clearly, we are ahead in the contract. I then went back and said, okay, now why is OUC doing this, okay? Because when you look at it, they actually did reduce the cash flow going to them by $14 million over the 8 years. So they actually have reduced some cash going to them. The question is, why would they do that? I think, alluding to what you just said, they got the gas transmission operation. That must be worth a fair amount of money because they've given up nearly $51 million in present value cash flow. They wouldn't normally do that. Mr. Wright just said they didn't have to do any of it. They could have said, no, we're not doing it. Correct? Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And just quickly, they have, under the existing contract, they have the gas transportation rights till December 31st,
Yes.
2029.
That's right, they do. I'll correct you, you're right. They do, but it's not quite as firm in terms of them having it forever, the gas rights.
No, that's right. They have it till that date.
Right.
Under the new contract, they have it till December 31,
Right. So
2023.
We're ahead of the game. We're certainly ahead of the game on a cash flow basis, OUC for OUC. No, forgetting everything else because it didn't change. Now, if you then analyze it on a OUC contract to going to the market contract, clearly we lost. The city folded because it said the go-to-market was clearly another $20,000 more valuable to us than the current proposed deal by OUC. When I ran the numbers again, strictly OUC to OUC, forgetting everything else because it didn't change, the go-to-market value to us on a present value basis was $74 million. The present proposed contract is worth $51 million savings. So we would have been better off go to the market, even after we paid the $50 million penalty, because I present value the $50 million too. The $50 million on a present value basis, just as we were talking about, would have been $42 million, and we would have netted a gain of $74 million. There isn't any doubt in my mind that we are better off. I don't think there's any value to any of this relationship after 8 years. We don't know what the future looks like there.
There's one other element to this. We have gotten switched to a take or pay.
Correct. That's one of my points.
So there is that risk that our power demands could drop substantially.
Right.
And then you end up being in a death spiral for this utility, because what happens is now we have the fixed cost of the 85 megawatt hour take or pay. You have customers leaving the system. You have an additional fixed cost that has to be distributed over more customers. The rate goes up. More customers leave the system, and that is my concern. That's why in the Utility Commission meeting we asked for, and maybe we're going to do this later on in the meeting, ask for information about some statistical analysis of why that level was picked, so that we don't pierce through the bottom of that, and we get stuck with those fixed costs. That's the part that scares me about this contract, because OUC is looking to take risk off the table. You go back to that exhibit that I referenced earlier, which is 3.2, that managed reserve margins. They're looking at that as well. So they're willing to give away some rate to us, and in order to have a given amount of power that we're going to have to take come hell or high water. And that's the part that we have to, that to me is the ultimate thing. I mean, Mr. Wright pointed that out clearly in his other presentations, is that is the consideration that OUC is taking. The issue is at the right level, or should it be lower, given all those trends that I talked about that are going on in the industry?
I agree with you. That was one of my concern points, too, that we do have a take-or-pay situation, and it is higher. Now, we do have some formulas in it for negating down to 75 megs, right, on an annual basis.
A couple of things. To be clear, and I know there continues to be confusion about this, and frankly, it's completely natural confusion because it relates to the difference between capacity and energy, demand and energy, megawatts and megawatt hours. Mm-hmm. The take or pay aspect of this contract only applies to the capacity charges. There's no take or pay as to energy. If sales drop, we buy fewer megawatt hours from OUC. We don't pay for them. There's no take or pay. We don't have to pay for 85 megawatt hours of energy for every hour. We have to pay for 85 megawatts of available capacity every month.
Which is the fixed cost.
That's the fixed cost.
The fixed cost.
It's the demand cost.
Right, the demand cost. I got it broke out both ways. Right.
And they have given us the ability to lower to recap the way our billing demand is calculated. You start with peak demand, you add 15%, you then subtract our other resources, which today are our FMPA generation entitlements and Big Blue, which together sum to 106 megawatts.
Right.
Under the new PPA, or probably under any scenario, we're going to shut down Big Blue, and we could hypothetically go to the market and buy just peaking capacity and stick with the existing OUC contract and do that. But whatever way you do it, it's the starting demand minus 106 megawatts.
All right, I understood that.
Peak demand plus 15% minus 106 megawatts. Today, that yields, with the 10 megawatt drop that they've allowed us to take, that drops it to 85. So we're right at the floor. Without the 10 megawatt drop, it would be 95, and our demand is projected to grow at rates slower than FPL, Duke, and OUC are projecting, like half or less of their projected rates. Both peak demand and energy are projected to grow. Our assumption is 0.5% a year. Theirs range from 1 to 1.5% per year, depending on the utility and the variable, i.e. peak or energy. So in simple terms, if without the 10 megawatt drop, the chances of us hitting the floor would be slim, I think. The chances of us really and truly losing 10 megawatts of load. Now, we could hypothetically lose the shores. If we lose the shores, we will demand stranded cost recovery from the shores. If we sell the shores, we will ask the shores to pay the stranded cost exposure.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's that simple. Now, so with that in mind, yeah, we're trying to figure out exactly how to do a statistical analysis of this, because what we've got is projected peak demands that grow over time at lower than industry standard rates in Florida, and it doesn't appear to us likely that it would bind. We would have to exogenously lose load. I mean, really and truly lose load. Something would have to happen to cause.
Well, look at
peak
Exhibit 2. I think there is that risk.
I'm sorry?
Look back to Exhibit 2, the 10 largest electric users. They represent 11% of our load. I mean, it's been well talked about in the press that Walmart and Sam's Club is looking to put grids on their roof of their stores. There's discussions in the paper about Piper. I mean, I don't know how, if that story is accurate or not. I mean,
but won't they have a minimum? Won't they still have to have backup power from us? And won't they have a minimum cost allocation of our overhead anyway? Ultimately, I don't know any solar power operation on a house that stands alone. The batteries aren't there yet.
But your demand goes down. That's the whole purpose of putting the panel on there.
Right.
So you're paying less. It's less revenues for the system.
But you still have they still got a fixed cost. It's like my car. I can buy the car that takes to 150 miles an hour, and I drive at 80. I still pay for the 70 over and above it. There is some allocation of cost to these users, isn't there?
We don't bill our users for.
Doesn't mean.
We don't bill Piper for the capacity. And if they lowered their energy usage, they would lower their bill absolutely.
I guess I'm not I can't imagine.
And plus, battery technology is getting better. Look at Tesla with their power walls and everything else, and there's grid scale power in order to deal with the issue of the sun only shining in the daytime.
I understand where you're coming from. I do. Yeah, you're right.
But it's a good point. We have these customers that have an economic incentive to move off our grid, and my understanding from what I understand of Piper's analysis is if they can get the natural gas to the airport, which is planned on coming in, that it would take them 2 years to recapture the investment in their own generation facility. It's a pretty fast payback.
Excuse me. I think Mr. Fletcher can, as we go on, address the issue of how what a time frame is to plan such changeover. What has to be done to get gas into from I-95 through to Piper, all the rights of way, what the planning is to put all of these fixtures in. It is not something that can be done in a short time frame. Just as a digression, I'm sorry.
Sure, but at the same token, I'll come back to your argument. You're correct. But standing here and doing nothing and living with a contract we know is going up, or mitigate it as best we can for the next 8 years and work our way through it, that's the choices we're facing. We can do nothing and live with our current contract, or we can do something and try to mitigate, lower the incentive for moving off our system.
I'm not suggesting that we do nothing. I just would like to have that information. That was part of the resolution the Utilities Commission passed last week. We still don't have that yet. So I haven't made up my mind on this.
I haven't either, but I'd like to see the figures too. But I think that's where the choices we're facing. So
I don't think anyone's suggesting that we do nothing. But your argument was the same in the October of 2014. It was a better deal than the current contract. But there were flaws in it, and we've negotiated a better deal, and there were flaws in that, and we've not got an even better deal presented to us. And I think there's still flaws in this agreement that they've come forward, the September 21st offer.
So let me get this straight. It's not an economic issue you're fighting with. It's a legal issue you're fighting with. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying I think there's more economic issue here. I think there are some legal issues. I think the Section 12, which I find, I'm glad that it's gone. That was clearly an legal issue. I honestly have to say I'm not surprised the 2008 City Council signed a document that was where they asserted that there was nothing in the document that contravened the city charter, when in fact Section 12 contravened the city charter, because they made this 2008 City Council has made, I think, a lot of incompetent decisions. But they weren't advised properly. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They weren't advised properly. They didn't have the Utility Commission and the Finance Commission go over the contract and say, hey, City Council, Section 3 says nothing in this document is contrary to the city charter or contravenes our city charter. But Section 12 says we give them a lease, which contravenes the city charter. The commissions did not do that job in 2008. And now, hence, we're here. And so I think that since we're amending the contract, I think if there are questions about the structure of the contract and the legalities of it, yes, we should raise them as we raise Section 12 and as Section 12 has been dealt with. But no, primarily it's the economics, and I think we need to understand the economics, the economic benefit of our partner in this, of our negotiating partner, or the other side. Why are they interested to keep us in the contract? What do they get out of it other than our payments? Or in addition to the clear payments of the checks that we write, is there other economics to them that caused them to send us a letter in July that bullied our city council into stopping the RFP process under a threat of more litigation, where they made the statement that I think is actually pretty ludicrous, to say that notwithstanding the section that I read, which says this is the limits of all the liability, we don't believe that. There's more liability. And I think that we need to make sure that the city of Vero Beach is getting the best deal possible that we can get from OUC, or go back to going to market.
Let me raise a question. The question I was going to ask Mr. Wright anyway. The way I understand our relationship with OUC, they could have said no, and we're not going to negotiate anything. Mr. Wright, was there an opportunity to go back for a peak load, say to Florida Power and Light, and could it have been appreciably better? I mean, could we have gotten our peak load capacity from anybody other than OUC? I mean, I don't know. just asking a question.
It is somewhat of a buyer's market, which is why in the spring we recommended issuing an RFP.
But we couldn't. I understand.
There are other sellers with capacity in the market who would love to sell capacity. Most of them don't offer real favorable prices. I'd rather not name names, but most of them don't offer real favorable prices.
But
some do in the short run. In the longer run, they tend up to really right around where we are and right around the market capacity payments that Mr. Harrington assumed in the go-to-market scenario. So, or even higher than that, because if they're IOUs, they're eventually constrained to charge their average embedded cost, which are higher than $10 a kW a month or $10,000 a megawatt a month. I'm not sure that answers your question, Mr.
I was just wondering if we could have gotten.
to.
I was just wondering if we could have gotten the same 54 from maybe Florida Power and Light, which might not have been frightened off by this lawsuit.
Well, here's the thing.
Bluff. I don't know.
On the peaking capacity, we could stick with the existing OUC contract,
Right.
retire Big Blue, and buy peaking capacity in the market. Over the next 8 years, I believe that the prices that we would pay for that peaking capacity would most likely be less than what we'll be paying OUC.
Right.
But the cost to the city of pursuing that path is giving up the price reductions on the base product with its presently $13,760 a megawatt month, going up to $14,950 in the remaining years, and being stuck in it from 24 through 29. That it was a tie-in sale, but it was a legit tie-in sale. It wasn't an antitrust violation tie-in sale.
Right, and that makes sense when I looked at the numbers. I mean, in fairness to them, I really have gone over the numbers carefully, and I'm confident that we've cut our costs from them and probably reduce some of our risk longer run.
We've cut our costs. We've cut our costs from OUC in total,
yes.
And and in so doing, we enable ourselves to cut all of our, all but $832,000 a year of the Big Blue cost, which are really $6 or $7 million a year over the relevant time horizon.
Clearly, 90%.
In addition to that,
90% of the present value gain was in shutting down the Big Blue, no doubt about it.
On a net basis, that's right. We do get a big price reduction on the supplemental, on the base capacity product.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then we, depending on how you look at it, so we're paying OUC not a whole lot less in total. So our big savings is shutting down Big Blue. On the other hand, you could say, well, we save a lot on base, and that's a big savings, and then we get a slight savings by shutting down Big Blue versus the cost of the peaking capacity. It actually is a slight savings every year, as I looked at it. Do y'all want me to talk about the load leaving and standby service and things like that? I'm happy to. I was the lead staff member on the standby rate docket at the PSC when I was on the staff there. I don't care. If you want me to, I'm happy to.
I'm not an expert, so.
I am.
You are.
I'll just say, the issue of what customers who go to partial self-gen is a live issue in the utility industry. Mr. Alwerder is correct. I mean, I represent solar developers. I represent Florida Retail Federation. I'm in the thick of all this. But in battery technology, I say this once a week, if not more frequently than that, battery technology is getting better. Solar costs are coming down. They're not there yet in terms of being economic for most customers under most conditions to go completely off grid. Mm-hmm. That leaves utilities in the posture of being able to charge for standby service.
That's what I thought too.
There are issues on that as to exactly how that will be allocated. But utilities are entitled to charge for standby service. Customers who have solar are entitled to get standby service.
Right. But, I mean, coming back to what you're discussing, it would appear like if you took the top 5 of our users, that staff itself could come up with the numbers probably of the demand charges and the total charge, how much would we lose if we lost the top 5 people? That's a good question. I don't know either. I did look at.
I mean, you're doing scenario analysis. And as I said, clearly OUC wanted to take risk off the table.
Yes.
And so the risk went someplace.
Yep.
It came here, and the question is it a risk we want to take? We need to know what it is going into the contract. We have to think it through, because I didn't live here in 2008. Well, my sense of all what was going on was this contract, there wasn't a lot of thought put into looking at all the different potential scenarios, and unfortunately, it was done at about the worst time you possibly could have done it, when oil prices were up $140 a barrel and gas was super high, and so forth. So,
right.
Just in addition to, I can't tell you all the. I don't know exactly what OUC's decision calculus was. I will tell you 3 things. 1, they wanted some protection against load erosion. That's a value that they can show their board.
Mm-hmm.
They got the peaking capacity sale, which replaces some of the revenues they give away. The only reason this deal works for both parties is that they get to replace part of the reduced base product demand charges with the peaking sale, which they can afford to do in the near term, and I'll get to that in a second. We get to shed even more costs than the cost of that peaking capacity by shutting down Big Blue.
Yeah.
I like the exhibit that Mr. Alwarder distributed, because it shows that if you look at, I think, 2016, OUC's, the delta between the red line and the blue line, which is total retail plus reserves, it's about 23%, but with the wholesale sales, their available capacity is very low in the green line, but then it drops back down, and they've got more. But the point is, their total retail load is growing over time. They have said that they anticipate presently, and nobody really knows, they anticipate needing to add capacity plus or minus in 2023. They have said they would prefer not to add capacity to serve wholesale load. To the extent they terminate the contract in 2020, at the end of 2023, they know that's coming. They can build that into their plan. That's 130 megawatts, 140 megawatts of capacity that they won't have to build load for, because remember, they're obligated to serve us on a firm basis. So there is some potential of avoided cost savings to OUC of not having to add capacity in that window, 2022, 3, 4, somewhere in there. I will say my strong opinion is that they view this like we view this. They don't want what I've described, I think accurately, as the train wreck of litigation between OUC and Vero Beach. And I think they put significant value on that. So they get there's value there for them. There's value there for us, and it is what it is. There's the numbers. Again, y'all are probably tired of hearing me say this, but assuming that everything holds still, principally sales forecast and gas price forecast, there's 120 million net present value, 170 million nominal value of savings to us by taking this new deal. A little less than half of that is the price and cost savings to the city over the next 8 years. A little more than half of that is the cost savings of being out of this contract at the end of 2023. Delay cost us money to the tune of several $100,000 a month. Here we are.
I didn't evaluate it beyond 23. Because it's a moot question in my mind.
Well, I just say because the demand prices in the existing PPA are so high, it's not a moot question.
Right.
There's big savings to us under any reasonably foreseeable scenario that in the out years on the capacity side, because $14.95 a kW a month is higher than the reasonably projected cost just to have the capacity of new gas-fired combined cycle capacity in place in those years.
Mr. Wright, I'm not arguing with that.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just making the point. There's real savings there.
You're right. But we're out of it in 08, so we got our freedom back in 08. That's 8 years out.
As in our last meeting, there was discussion about the gas contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some question about where the $10 million number that floats around came from. And I made reference to the evaluation, which everybody, I believe, has a copy of today.
Yeah, that would be Exhibit 4. And there's a lot of detail there, but if you go to page 1 on the bottom, 1-6, table 1.3, it says contract values by weighted average cost of capital, and they calculate it with rates anywhere between 4 and 14%.
Right. And it shows that we have approximately 20,000 MMBTUs of capacity under our contracts, most of it being under Tier 1, and that's where most of our value is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the statement was made that it's actually a liability to us and a very little value to OUC. Am I remembering our last meeting accurately?
Mr. Stradley, I'm not sure. Here's what I believe to be true, and we can sort it out to the extent we need to. It has very little value, direct value, to the city of Vero Beach unless we're going to build a new power plant. It has some liability in that we are obligated to make the payments at least until the next FGT rate case, at which point I believe we can get out of it. I'm confident that's right. So it has little value to the city of Vero Beach as such. Councilmember Turner made an excellent point in the colloquy that we had last Tuesday, and that is that it would have some value to Vero Beach in terms of negotiating hypothetically negotiating for a better price with a new supplier. Probably that was a consideration of OUC's value in 2008. Probably that was a consideration of OUC's value in renegotiating this deal. And honestly, I did not know about this PA consulting study until last Wednesday or Thursday when Mr. O'Connor found it and sent it to me. I was aware of a different PA consulting study on the FMPA contracts. But what this shows is an estimated total value as of 2012, evaluated over the period 2012 to 2030. The value to others was between $5.5 and $10.8 million. OUC already at that point in time, OUC already had this was in the context of evaluating the value of that in the context of the sale to FPL, the sale of our system to FPL. OUC already had those rights under the existing PPA, as they do, as we stand here today, as I stand here today. They have those rights till 2029. So the incremental value to OUC is whatever present value of the delta between the market value of that capacity and the pricing, the FERC-approved pricing of that capacity would be after 2030. Under the new PPA, it's the present value of the future value as of 1/1/24 minus the what would hypothetically be will be, assuming FERC stays in existence regulating the price of gas transportation. It'd be the difference between the market price and the tariff price.
Well, my understanding is Mr. Harrington made the comment that we could not monetize that value by raising the price to somebody else. And I came across this exhibit 4 like Scott did. So I started to go out on the web this weekend, and if you look on this page here, I think there's some extra copies there. I'm trying to figure out how could it be so different. On one hand, this consulting group says it has value, and you guys say it don't. And I found FERC order number 712 dated June 19, 2008, and I just took a few pages out of it. If you look where I highlighted, the Commission permits market-based pricing for short-term capacity releases and facilitates asset management arrangements by relaxing the Commission's prohibition on tying in on its bidding requirements for certain capacity releases. So if we do a release less than a year, we can do it at market. And then you go back to, at least as I'm reading it, and look, I'm not an energy lawyer, so maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but language seems pretty plain. If you go next to section 25 on the next page, it says, talks about the removal of the price ceiling on short-term releases. And then if you go to the last page of this packet, furthermore, the final rule clarifies the price ceiling does not apply to any consideration provided by an asset manager to releasing shipper as part of an asset management agreement, which is a specific legal agreement. So it seems like it does have value, and it's part of the consideration that we could potentially monetize. So whether that changes the dynamic on this agreement, I don't know, but I think we should just at least, it seems different than what Mr. Harrington said last week.
Well, I think we were talking about long-term releases, which you can only release at the maximum rate under the tariff. And I agree with you. I agree.
Well, I think that's what this says.
This is short-term capacity releases.
Well, no, but
up to
also
a year.
talks about an asset management agreement. It takes the price off, and you could also roll the short-term releases. It doesn't say anything that I could find in the regulation about not having the ability to roll it over and over again. So I think that's what the consulting group saw when they came up with this value.
I think that's exactly what the consulting group saw. And it was what it was. It's $5.5 to $10.8 million valued over the term 2012 to 2030. And I agree that it is potentially possible to monetize it. We may or may not, intentionally or otherwise. Actually, I would tell you if we did, it was not fully intentional, although this was a whole negotiation, and they got some value from the FGT capacity in the deal. We got a lot lower prices. If you look at the total, I don't know what they've got the rights today, starting all the way through 12/31/29. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the present value after 12/31/29 is of the difference between the market cost and the tariff rates, but I'll bet you it's a lot less than $5 million.
I would tend to agree with that. Yes.
And so I would say and probably the same thing is true for starting 1/1/2024 is probably still less than $5 million. It's probably, if it's greater than, it's probably not significantly greater than $5 million. And so hypothetically, there's this monetized benefit that we may have already gotten from OUC in the whole package that we've negotiated.
It's possible.
Regardless, the savings are a whole lot greater than $5 or $10 million.
My only point to bring up is Mr. Harrington kind of dismissed it as not having any value, and and if you look back, I think his statements were inaccurate.
I think it's actually I think it's actually greater than the $5 million in a present value basis. OUC in March, in the minutes of their March 10th meeting of Board of Directors meeting in 2015, they purchased some FTS2 contracts, and there was some concern about the ability to monetize excess capacity at that time, and their board was told that they could 10 to 15 cents out of the 72-cent rate. I believe that's 72 cents per MMBTU
per day. Yep,
would yield them approximately $1 million a year. So they're able to monetize excess. This was so valuable to them that they, according to they were authorized to get this permanent release of FTS2 by RNG Power Management in the amount of $43,500,000. They were authorized to pay that, so that they got this company NGR2, which had FTS2 contracts like we do, and the FTS2 contract is the smaller of our 20 million MMBTUs. It's only about 1.9 out of our total MMBTUs. I don't know the quantity of MMBTUs that they purchased from NRG Power Marketing. I think that would be a piece of information that we should have as we go into this negotiation. That would give a value to it. But also, subsequently to that, in the July 14th OUC board meeting, staff said that, and I'll read this, LGN Holdings Florida, LLC, a subsidiary of Fortress Energy Partners, plans to build a liquefied natural gas facility on property adjacent to OUC's Indian River plant. The liquid natural gas facility will eventually be connected to the FGT system. OUC is uniquely positioned to provide natural gas to the facility. The LGN Holdings and OUC have reached an agreement for a 5-year term beginning April 1st, 2016, which includes 20,000 MMBTU per day, or approximately a $5 million annual reduction in fuel cost for the potential for liquid natural gas storage rights at IRP. It seems to me, if I'm reading this or understanding what I'm reading here, that 20 million MMBTUs is worth $5 million a year to OUC. 20 million MMBTUs is what we're permanently transferring to them. So if it's worth $5 million per year, the present value of $5 million per year is a number certainly much bigger than less than $5 million. And so I think that at the very least, this raises questions about what's the asset that we're transferring away worth? Is it actually greater than the $10 million appraisal? A $5 million a year reduction in fuel costs, which is equivalent of a cash flow forever, is bigger. Net present value is bigger, and we don't know that it would be forever. It is definitely a 5-year contract. So that's a $25 million savings to them. And if we went to market, voided this contract, we would get that 20 million MMBTU back. OUC would not have an additional surplus 20 million MMBTU, or I don't know that it's additional or surplus, but they would not have 20 million MMBTUs to transfer to Fortress Energy Partners at their long-term natural gas facility, or liquefied natural gas facility. So I think that the more I look at this and the more we study it, the more questions that come up. And, this whole process started, the OUC's contract started because we got into the All Requirements Project. And I wish Mr. Whittle had been able to make the meeting today because he was on the Utility Council back then, Utility Commission back then. We, along with, I believe, 5 other generating utilities, municipal utilities, formed the All Requirements Project in an effort to lower. With the FMPA, we were part of the 5 initial, was it 5 generating utilities?
I don't think, what got my attention is I don't think that's right. I think the ARP already existed. I think the 5 generating utilities came in as new partners, as new project participants in the ARP much later, and reserved the CROD rights as they came in.
Thank you. I was actually still in college back then, but so I appreciate that, and I'm trying to relate this. But anyways, we got in.
Yep.
Our dispute with the ARP was they were supposed to buy power from us. They developed their own generation, and they were able to produce power economically at a better economic rate for their own generation, the ARP, than to buy from us. So they weren't buying as much power from our Big Blue as we thought they were going to, and we were stuck with the cost of maintaining Big Blue and not generating power. And I don't know what the value was back then, but today it's $4 to $6 million a year. So we entered a arbitration process with them, a dispute with the ARP. We lost. We spent millions of dollars doing that. I believe we spent about $6 million, if I recall. And we lost, and so we gave notice that we were going to leave the Our Requirements project. We then entered into this contract with OUC, which this contract with OUC doesn't let us use our power plant. So our objection to the ARP was we weren't using our power plant, and we were stuck with the fixed cost. We entered into this contract with OUC there where we don't use our power plant, and we're stuck with the fixed cost. Now we're trying to get rid of our power plant and get rid of the fixed cost, which is the same basic fundamental issue that we had with the ARP contract back in the early 2000s. I want to be careful that we don't do a mistake, again, make another mistake as we go into these contracts, go forward into this new contract, whether you call it I think it's got enough substantial changes that we could call it a new contract. But it's an amended contract. We're going to have a take-or-pay provision to it that's almost, it looks like it's 95% of our capacity is now going to be bound up in a take-or-pay provision. And that's I wish I had better numbers because that's the number I've been asking for months. And I want to make a wise decision. I want to give the council wise advice. I want to have sufficient information to do that. And that's my frustration is I don't get that. I find this a comparable sale of FTS2. Maybe I don't understand these numbers, but I need to understand these numbers. How much did they buy of FTS2 for $43.5 million? How much are they going to get this $5 million annual reduction in fuel costs for 20,000 MMBTUs, which we have transferred? They have our 20,000 MMBTUs today. They're going to have it forever. Or we could take it back today if we defaulted on the contract and went to market. And then, so this is information that I think is crucial to making a decision on how to advise City Council on going forward. Information that we've been asking for, information that we don't have. And, you know, I appreciate this email that I received this morning that you sent on Saturday that talked about some of the questions that we raised last Monday and the resolve to them, and I really appreciate that. I find it ironic that I don't get a copy of this, that I learn about this by reading a blog on the internet. I don't know how that blogger got this information when the members of the commission did not get the information. And so this is frustrating. We need the information to make this decision. We need to know what our gas contracts are worth. I don't think it's a de minimis amount. I don't think it's a liability to us. I think there's real value to us there. We have an appraisal that says $10 million to OUC, a little bit different number to Florida Power and Light. I think that based on what I read in the OUC minutes, I think it's probably higher. I don't know, but that's my problem. I don't know. And I don't know how I can advise the City Council what to do when I don't have material facts. So I would like an analysis of this transaction. I'd like to know what this really means, and perhaps you do know. Perhaps you're aware of this purchase, and you can enlighten us.
Well, the language in the existing contract is different from the proposed new contract, if we're calling that, with regard to this, because assignment of gas transportation in the existing contract at the termination of the contract reverts back to Vero Beach. In this proposed new contract, Article 2, it remains permanently with OUC. So we would be assigning gas transportation to OUC permanently or in perpetuity.
That's right.
I suppose.
And compared to what the parties' rights are today, OUC is gaining to the capacity as of January 1st, 2030. They have rights today. I don't know. I didn't know about the transaction with LNG or LGN, the Fortress sub, until you mentioned it this morning, Mr. Stradley. But whatever they were in the context of OUC's existing portfolio of gas transportation, which, as we stand here today, until 12/31/29, includes our gas transportation rights. Whatever value it has to OUC as of today is the incremental value beyond that. Under the new PPA, it's the incremental, hypothetically, it's the incremental value beyond 1/1/24.
I disagree, because as it stands today, the last, and as I said on Monday, my advice to City Council was go to market. Our advice to City Council of both commissions was go to market. I said we need new information to show us why we're changing our opinion. So as my opinion, as my recommendation to City Council stands, as our recommendation to City Council stands, it's go to market, retain those rights as soon as we default in the contract, which was when we replaced the rights. And or perhaps as soon as we ask for the rights according to OUC, we're defaulting on the contract. But be that as it may, no, it's not the 2008 versus this. It's go to market versus this. That's the decision. Go to market saves us $16 million versus this contract under our analysis. It also gives us back the gas transportation contracts, which we then can subsequently market. Perhaps they only bought the same amount of FTS2 for $43.5 million. Is that the value of our FTS2 contract? It depends on the quantity that they bought. I don't know that quantity. I haven't been able to learn that. But I think that we have comparable sales. We do know that 20,000 MMBTUs is worth $5 million a year to them. And with this deal with Fortress. And so we have 20 million MMBTUs. And we're giving them 20 million MMBTUs. So I don't know. It's not they have it until 2029. Yes, they have it until 2029 until we give them notice that we're out and we're doing something different, like we had advised City Council to do, like they accepted our advice as we issued the RFP. And then OUC came in, and our opinion, with restraint of trade, and I thought your response to their letter was, or your and Wayne's response was brilliant, and I was very proud of the city for finally standing up to these legal bullies. And yet then we end up caving. So it may be worthwhile to enter into this contract because we can affect these savings sooner than going to market, and we would not have the litigation costs that we're obviously going to face if we go to market. Or it may be that there's a better deal out for us. They sold. They entered into a wholesale agreement with Lake Worth that's even better than I believe it's even better than this deal that they're offering to us. I would like to know how much better that is.
I can tell you that's one, the actual numbers are trade secret. Two, it is a better deal. Three, Lake Worth was in the market as a buyer at the right time. We were in the market as a buyer at the wrong time. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The 2008 PPA made perfect sense when it was signed in April of 2008 as the price of natural gas was passing through $9 on its way to $14. It made perfect sense. It was a good contract at the time. 20-year term is a different issue. All I know is from what I've been told by folks who were around at the time, and that is that this city, Vero Beach, wanted a long-term contract to have things locked up. Yeah, that is what it is. That was 7 years ago. Yes, the Lake Worth deal is a better deal. I was there. I negotiated the Lake Worth deal. It's a better deal. It's a better deal because it was like the very peak of the beneficial buyer's market for capacity.
We're still in a buyer's market today. That's why we did our analysis.
I will tell you what. We're still in a buyer's market. It's not nearly as good as it was in 2012-13 when we negotiated the Lake Worth deal.
Okay, and I understand that there are trade secrets, but the invoices are public record. And so we can see what they're being charged for capacity, and we can see what they're being charged for demand, and we can see what they're being charged for energy. And we can at least extrapolate some information based on that. So I don't, again, I come back to the fact that I don't have the information. I don't know. There's things that I still wish that I knew, so that I could do my job advising the city council.
Would you like me to address your question about the email?
Yes, thank you.
I emailed it. We got done with finalizing the language after hours on Friday. I had some personal stuff I had to attend to. I went back to the office on Saturday. I emailed it to Ms. Vaughn and Mr. O'Connor and asked them to transmit it to y'all. For whatever reason, that didn't happen until when it happened. Naturally enough, it was Saturday afternoon. I think they can be forgiven for not sending it out immediately because they might have been doing other fun stuff on the weekend. Mr. Schumann called me at home. He's had my cell phone number for a while. Lots of people have my cell phone number. He called me and asked me about a story he was writing and asked me what was up, asked me was there a document. I said, yes, there's a document. OUC has agreed. Will you send it to me? Yes, I sent it to him. That's how it happened. And just the way the timing fell, I sent it to the city 24 hours, a little less than 24 hours earlier. But that's how it happened.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was wondering whether the commissioners would prefer a 10-minute break at this point. We've been going on for, I'll open it up.
Yes.
Yes.
Take a break.
Chairman, just something for clarification. On the RFP, I made the original decision to pull the RFP. It was based on two premises. One is that we'd received the letter from OUC. In my opinion, that clouded the market. You were not going to get proper responses in an open market for those. And some of the folks that I had talked to that were going to bid, actually one of them said they were backing out. They were not going to get involved in some type of issues such as that. So the market was definitely clouded. The second thing is, as I was being advised, there was a possibility of an injunction being issued, and we'd be standing here today not talking about a revised OUC contract. We'd be talking about what is our next legal strategy to try to fight the litigation, and still stuck with the higher rates plus additional legal issues. So I take responsibility for that, because when we sat down and got the letter, we sent the other letter off, talking to all the advisors I had, I said, guys, we will pull it, and obviously contingent upon City Council, they have the ultimate authority to do whatever. But it was the decision, it was premised on those two major factors as to why that was done.
Well, that's kind of interesting, because the contract does not call for injunctive relief.
That is true, but you still have the path of litigation that goes forward. And we could have, fought that if we wanted to, but the contract also doesn't say that you can get in excess of $50 million. Obviously, the letter implied that they were going to try.
Well, it stated that they were going to do it.
Yeah. And so, as we all know, and anyone's dealt with, and unfortunately in our case here in Vero Beach, we've dealt with an awful lot of attorneys. You can sit there and strategize, and you can pull out your numbers, and you can say this, and you can say that, but at the same time, you're going through a court process. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're going to the state Supreme Court, which was unbelievable. But so we are in those type of exercises. And in my opinion, the key is to try to minimize what our exposure was. If the market would have been clear, the RFP was submitted and put out to market in order to find what those best prices were. But when you have a clouded market, there's no way you can do that analysis.
I just mentioned that then would be involved with the county, would be involved with the shores, and would be involved with OUC as the legal fees would just then geometrically increase, plus all of the time and effort, to say nothing about any impact on the rates, would go forward.
Right. And it's two premises on this that I think are very important, and Chef has pointed it out on this new contract, because we heard very loud and clear the first time when we brought this in, the term of the contract is too long, the term of the contract is too long. So we worked on getting that shortened. And the other part of it was we wanted a reduction in our cost for purchase power. And we chose those two as our primary objectives. And we can talk about the 85 megawatts and what is the potential ramifications. And hopefully, Chef and Bill will be able to explain what is that risk analysis that will have to go into that. Coming back to the gas line, Scott, that you were talking about, the appraisal was $10 million. The way I looked at it, this contract represented about $129 million. So you are trading off the potential of what it is. And, to bring OUC to a contract, you had to have something on our side. Otherwise, you just fall to where you are. But that's an analysis that you all collectively and the city council are going to have to make that decision. Is that trade-off worth the reduction in cost going forward? And sooner or later, or now or whenever, we're going to do that. But again, I think that's just part of the cost analysis everybody has to think over, and is it worth it?
Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to go forward with a 10-minute recess. So it's, 10:30?
10:38.
10:50.
10:50.